Hello, Yins. Happy Friday, April 28th. This is also my sister's birthday, so happy birthday, Daria. This is her 23rd. She does not listen to this because she's not a hockey fan, but if she ever somehow stumbled upon this, happy birthday. I'm very proud of you with everything that you do. But for today's episode, we are going to touch on Bryan Rust's season in review, go into how he was a bit unlucky in some areas this past season, and also why he could bounce back in a decent way next season. Also get into another goaltender option that the Penguins could trade for that a YouTube commenter suggested. I'm going to leave it at that. And then we'll touch on the Stanley Cup Playoffs as we finally have a couple of teams who have advanced to round two. So that's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. So let's jump right into it regarding Bryan Rust and his season review. So, when you look at the, his regular counting stats this season, you will obviously see some lows. It was definitely not the season that he envisioned. 20 goals, 46 points this year. His 20 goals is the lowest since 2018-19. We had 18. After that, had 27. He had 22. Last year had 24. This year 20. He also had 12 less points this season compared to last season. Last season, he actually set a career high in points, 58 points in 60 games. This year, 46 and 81. So it was only about a little over half a point per game this season. His underlyings were fine for the most part. It was just he was getting unlucky. I'm going to get into that, right now. And I'm going to start with I'm not ready to give up on him just because, I do think he can come back a bit better next season. You look at some of the numbers on the power play, and, this comes courtesy of Natural Stat Trick. So this season, in 80 games that Russ had, he had 175 minutes on the power play. 2 minutes per game on the power play, an average of that. Well, yes, an average of 2 minutes, 211. His goals per 60, 0.68. If you compare that to last season on the power play, 2.62 goals per 60 on the power play. Season before that, 2.32. And then before that, 3.19. Even this season, total assists per 60, 3.08. Last year, 3.49. Primary assists per 60 on the power play, 1.71 this season, 2.33 last season. Total points per 60 on the power play, 3.76, 6.1 last season, 4.25 the season before, 6.77 in 2019-20. His shooting percentage, 8%. Compare that to the last 2 seasons where he shot over 18%. That tanked his scoring. He wasn't, I understand the power play was not good this season, but he just couldn't do anything on it. He couldn't generate chances. He couldn't, generate shot attempts. He couldn't do anything. And again, if you compare that to all of the seasons before that, it's night and day. So if that just goes back to even a fraction of what he did last season and then before that, I think you see his numbers definitely go up next season. Most of his production this season came at 5-on-5. And it's similar it's a little similar to Jake Guentzel because Jake didn't have many power play goals this season, but Rust had less power play goals than Jake. That's just how much Bryan struggled on the power play. And that's why you saw him actually get replaced on the power play, about a quarter of the way, third of the way through the season for Rickard Rakell, because you're always going to have Letang, Crosby, Malkin, you're always going to have Guentzel on it. But for a long time, it was Rust on that top unit. But they ended up replacing him because he just couldn't do anything. And even when he was getting time on the second unit, it still was not good enough. So I think the main reason why his numbers really tanked this season. And then if you go down to his 5-on-5 numbers, they were in line, with where they were in prior seasons. This season played 81, 80, obviously, basically a full season, 1,082 minutes at 5v5, averaged a little over 13 minutes. His goals per 60, 0.78. Before that, 0.73 last season, 0.76 the season before that. So his 5-on-5 numbers are decent. His total assists per 60, 0.78. His total points per 60, 1.55. So it went down a little bit, but last season it was 2.05. The season before that, 1.52, and his numbers were a bit better. Shooting percentage, 8.24, a little below where he was last season at 8.55. But, you're seeing that his 5-on-5 production, it was decent. He was creating scoring chances. He was positive in expected goals, positive in high danger chances. He was turning those into goals, but he sometimes didn't get rewarded. And you could obviously say that for the power play as well. I really think his biggest thing this season, and I know it's been a team issue for the last couple of years, is his lack of finishing. And usually that's not the case for someone like Rust because he's good at finishing his chances. He has a shooting percentage, usually well over, 10, 11%. This season, it was a little bit lower than that. He had the right, this was the big thing for him. The process was there. The results were not. And am I still concerned going into next season a little bit? Yes. He just signed that big extension. A player like this can go down the hill really quickly. If he has another season like he had this year, next season, I'm going to be a bit nervous for that. That's for sure. But, overall, I thought he played a bit better down the stretch. I mostly think a good chunk of his season was due to bad luck and poor finishing. And if he can get the finishing back to where it was this season before this one, and then, in 2021 and 2020, I think he'll have a much better rebound next season. I really did. Because, and the funny thing is, again, he still had 20 goals this year. The whole Penguins top six had 20 goals, but it looked like for a while that he wasn't going to get there. Then he did have that nice hot streak to end the season. And, he's capable of doing that. He's also kind of a streaky player. And there were times this season where he would go 8 to 10 games without a goal. And he's hard on himself. You can tell, after shifts where he's not scoring, he's slamming the bench door. He's smashing his stick on the bench. I remember, even on the penalty kill when he's not even scoring, when the Penguins gave up that goal with less than 3 minutes left against the Senators, where they couldn't even get a point out of that game. I heard, apparently he was just beside himself in the locker room because he knew that he was having a miserable season. So I think he's going to take this one to heart. And I do think, or at least my hope is that he has a better campaign in 2023, 2024. So if I had to grade him, would maybe give him like a C, maybe a little lower than that, like a C- if you want to put plus and minuses in there. But I think he can definitely go up to at least a B next season if his finishing does improve. So let me know what you all think. Do you think Bryan Rust is going to improve next season? And if so, why? Or tell me if you don't think he's going to improve. Also, tell me why on that. So that wraps up this first segment of the podcast. Coming up to for the second segment, I almost said the final segment. The second segment, we're going to get into that other goaltender option that a YouTube commenter pointed out to me because if the Penguins want to strike big, they could do this one. But before we get to that, we do have to discuss eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay is only guaranteed fit to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at @Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. So I saw a comment on the YouTube page earlier today. I believe this came from Andrew Gomez. He says, here's one for you, Hunter. Having just watched Johnny Hawkeye's video about Rick Bowness's blow up after the Jets were eliminated. And if you did not watch Rick Bowness blow up to the media, he spoke for 2-3 minutes and he let everyone have it. The Jets got destroyed by the Vegas Golden Knights on Thursday night. Bowness was not happy. He was, when you put the words disgusted a few times in your answers, there's going to be some big changes coming to Winnipeg. And this is where Andrew leads it. He goes, he suggested that Connor Hellebuyck would be requesting a trade to a U.S. team if the Jets dismantle their current team by trading a lot of their core. Next year is the final year of Hellebuyck's contract. What do you think of the Penguins making a move for Connor Hellebuyck through a trade? I mean, obviously, Andrew, sign me up for Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, if the Penguins could go after him, I would do that in a heartbeat. It's kind of similar to throwing everything at UC Saros. I do think you're going to see a lot of changes with regard to the Winnipeg Jets. The time has maybe reached an end here with the core. You have Mark Scheifele. What's going to happen with him? Blake Wheeler, Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's getting close. Nikolai Ehlers, Kyle Connor. What's the plan here? What's Josh Morrissey? You got to figure out who's staying and who's going in. Hellebuyck, I could see, and Elliot Friedman talked about this on the 32 Thoughts podcast today too. He even said, there's a chance that he could even get traded this summer. And Hellebuyck, he's awesome, people. I mean, I know in the playoffs, if I can just making sure I have his numbers here, he did struggle, allowed 3 more goals above expected, 86 save percentage, 3.44 goals against average. But during the regular season, he saved 31 goals saved above expected, played in 64 games, 920 save percentage, 2.49 goals against average. Save percentage on unblocked shots was 956. He carried the Jets to the playoffs. He was the only reason. They were really good the first half of the season, and then they started to stink in January and February. But he was still very good in the second half, even when it looked like they were not going to make it at times. It was funny. The Jets, every time they would win, it would look like, they're going to pull away. But then they would lose a couple. And it's like, you're inviting Nashville to come back in. You're inviting Calgary to come back in. And eventually they got in. But I don't think any serious person picked the Jets to win that series. I understand Vegas was very fraudulent coming in, but they got Stone back. Eichel's awesome. Theodore, Pietrangelo, Brossoit is playing decent for them. They were going to win that series. Maybe they weren't. I didn't know if they were going to win in 5, but I thought Vegas was the better team, and they showed that. Connor Hellebuyck can only do so much for you in that situation. So, I would be all for it, Andrew. You can definitely add that, to the Penguins goaltending wish list if you want. Trade package, that's a big one. You're talking first round pick, top prospect, good roster player, probably another first round pick. I know that sounds like a lot, and I know some of these players don't go for that kind of price. But in terms of Hellebuyck, who is arguably the best goaltender in hockey, I think they're going to ask for a king's ransom for him if he gets put on the market. But he would solve a lot of Penguins' problems. I know his contract, it's not super long, Andrew. You said he does have he's next year is the final year of his contract, so the Penguins will get a full season with him. But that next number, it is going to be a big one. That's going to be a high ticket, and I don't know if the Penguins will be able to afford that. Then that gets really interesting, right? If you want to go down this rabbit hole. Say the Penguins do trade for Connor Hellebuyck, and we're in silly season right now, people. This is how it goes. Say they do trade for Hellebuyck. They don't have an extension for him or Jake Gensel. What do you do there? That's what I'm really looking for. Again, you shed some salary to keep both. That would be interesting. I think there could be a way you keep both because, a lot of the core is taking discounts to come back. But then you have Sid up in 2 seasons. You have to figure out the math. And obviously, I think a new GM will be able to do that because I think you can figure out a way to get all those players signed back and be able to add, quality depth around, your star and your core. But it's definitely an interesting question, to say the least. But no, I would be all for adding Hellebuck. He would be a perfect goaltender for this team. Do I think it happens? Probably not, Andrew, but wow, sign me up. Him, UC Soros, Jeremy Swayman, they got to do something big, I think, in goal for next season. If it's not that, you got to bring someone in who can challenge Jari. It can't just be Jari and DeSmith running it back. And that's if they do bring Jari back on like a short-term deal or something like that. But I don't think he should be, the full-fledged starter if he does come back. I think you need to get someone in there who can really push him. He can play the same amount of games, if not a little bit more than him. And that's what I'm really looking at for the goaltending position for next season. But yes, Connor Hellebuck, you can come on down there. You can bring Kyle Connor with you if you want. You can bring, I was going to say Nikolai Ehlers. Great when healthy, but he's obviously pretty banged up a lot of times. But you can bring Kyle Connor with you for all I care. But yeah, so I think all I really have to say about that, that wraps up this second segment. Coming up to end the show, finally have some teams in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. We're going to discuss that to end this. Don't go anywhere. It's coming up right after this commercial break. All right, I'm back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at @LRSCorePenguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. So, Stanley Cup playoffs. We finally have a couple of teams who have gone through. We discussed Vegas. They defeat the Jets in 5 games. And we did just see the Hurricanes take out the Islanders in 6 games. Look, the Islanders get no sympathy from me. I know my fandom as a kid is coming out there because they've broken my heart a few sometimes, and I know they've broken a lot of people's other hearts who are a lot older than me. I know 93 comes to mind, but also know a series before that in the 70s comes to mind. Trust me, that team has been a thorn in the Penguins' side ever since they came into the league. And that's why it doesn't get any sympathy from me. It felt like that team had 10,000 lives, and it felt only fitting that Ilya Sorokin gave up a garbage goal for them to lose because he came onto the scene 2 years ago. And outside of Tristan Jarry was the biggest reason why the Islanders won, because I will continue to say that the Penguins easily should have won that series in 2021. They were the better team. Their underlyings were much better. If they would have gotten a save from either one of their goalies, well, mainly Tristan Jarry, and if Sorokin wasn't God in Game 5, they probably win that series. But that's 2 years old. But Carolina, the deserved winner. I thought they were the better team in this series. They really turned it up in the third period and in overtime. I don't think they're going to beat New Jersey. If the Devils win, New York, they might be able to because the Rangers are reeling right now. But the Hurricanes are just really banged up. I'm not really sure they're going to have the firepower to match New Jersey or potentially New York if they're able to come back and win that series. Speaking of that, the Devils just blow out the Rangers in Game 5. Game 6 set for Saturday at Madison Square Garden. I said this on my Thursday episode into Friday. Rangers lose that game, I think you're looking at a coaching change. I think a lot of Rangers fans are out on Gallant. I have a couple buddies texting me who are Rangers fans saying if the Penguins want to fire Mike Sullivan, we'll gladly take them off their hands. And it's like, no, that doesn't need to happen. Thanks. I don't need Mike Sullivan going to a division rival because I actually think he would make the Rangers to be a really good team. So no thanks to that. But Bruins, Panthers, wow. If you would have told me that Bruins, Panthers would be going to Game 7 after how awful the Panthers looked in Games 3 and 4, I would have thought you were on meth. I'm serious. I am 1,000,000% serious. I would have thought you were on meth, cocaine, whatever drug you want to put out there, because they got crapped on in the Sunrise. They go into Boston Game 5. They get a little lucky to win that game. Boston outplayed them. Bobrovsky played well. But tonight, Allmark stunk. The Bruins were bad in the defensive zone. That was a back and forth affair, just total drunk hockey. No goalie could make a save. We're going to Game 7 on Sunday, and all of the pressure's on the Bruins. You cannot lose that game after winning 65 games to win the President's Trophy with all those expectations. You cannot lose that game. I know people how do I want to say this? I know the Panthers will say, oh, there's pressure on us too. Not nearly as much as it is on Boston. You lose that game, social media is going to have a field day with that. And I'd be curious to see what happens in that organization this summer, because after the season they had, how they destroyed every team, can't lose that, especially going up 3-1 and looking dominant. You cannot lose that series, lose that an 8th seed 3 times in a row. No. So I'm really curious to see how that goes on Sunday. A couple of the other scores right now, if I'm just making sure I have this right. This is obviously going to be changed by the time you also listen to this. Last time I saw, okay, so the Kraken did tie it up. Vince Dunn got the opening goal, and then it was Mikko Rantanen to tie the game late in the first period, so 1-1. And then the Stars are currently up on the Wild right now, Rupe Hintz, as they're trying to eliminate them. And then we also will get Edmonton, LA on Saturday. I like the Oilers to win that. I think they're going to win the series. Seeing them go up against the Golden Knights will be an awesome series. Really want to see that with all that scale. Goaltending, I think, will be pretty decent for both teams. I would really want to see that. Rangers, Devils, we'll have to see what happens here. The Devils have really turned it up a notch. It's up to the Rangers to adjust. That's not Gerard Gallant's forte. He's been brutally outcoached again in this series. I'll continue to say it, that Mike Sullivan was schooling him before Louis Domingue couldn't make a save in last year's playoffs. He was running him out of the building. Gerard Gallant is not a good coach. He's just not. If there's a coach that gets bailed out by superstar talent, it is him. And honestly, there's some legacy games on the line here for Panarin and Zibanejad. They haven't done a thing all series. Kane had that one moment where he did something good, but it's mainly been for them, Igor Shesterkin, Adam Fox, and Chris Kreider. I don't really think anyone else on that team has really showed up, to be honest. Maybe Barclay Goodrow a little bit. But their star players have got to be a lot better going forward. But, that will wrap up this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. A little bit shorter than usual, but we still had some good things to talk about. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Monday as we start the month of May. Crazy how fast this month is going, how fast this year is going, excuse me. And we'll get all the updates on the Stanley Cup Playoffs, continue the season reviews, also hopefully have some more mock off-season moves, and we'll also have Danny Shirey on next week as well. I'm still trying to confirm that. He's obviously from DK Pittsburgh Sports. So thank you all so much for listening / watching. I really appreciate it. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Monday. Have a great weekend.